Like you mentioned, my name is Chad Randall. First of all, I would just want to give a big thank you to Glassdoor for sponsoring this presentation today, as well as HCI for hosting this event. Welcome, everyone. And what I want to do is just, it was kind of interesting as I was going through identifying what the building a sourcing strategy, because this dates back within PNC about 5 years ago. And what was interesting is my particular story and how I got to PNC fits very closely into our strategy as it sits today and what we did to build it. And so my life in talent acquisition started about 14 years ago. I was in financial services. Ended up getting a call from a headhunter at the time to looking to fill some sales roles within the area. And so I connected with him. He sent me out on several interviews, interviewed a bunch of times, got some offers, turned them all down. And he turned to me and said, listen, man, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want something with, residual relationship building. I like the sales end, but really want to get into something where I'm building relationships, and those will be the fruits of the labor. And he said, well, why don't you get into this business? I said, well, what's your business? He said, well, I've been working with you for 3 months. That's my business. I, find opportunities for companies and help build companies. So I ended up talking to their VP, and, 10 years later, I had spent a good amount of time in the staffing and an executive search business. And after about 10 years of that, I ended up getting a call from PNC. This is probably summer of 2009. And somebody I knew had gone to PNC, had made a recommendation, and to my now boss, Jillian Snavely, and she had reached out to me. I went into that conversation with a list of 3 names of people I was going to refer to her, because I was not interested in leaving my job as an executive search consultant. And after 20 minutes with her on the phone, I decided to take another call from her. Next thing I know, I'm flying to Pittsburgh, and understand that this is a really, really unique opportunity with a unique organization. And that really kind of snowballed into when we were just starting to build our sourcing strategy. And so I was one of the first hires towards the end of 2009, was brought in as a sourcer, and then quickly was able to help be a part of building this. It's really a strong vision. We've seen a lot of companies that have been attracted to this model. Everyone does it in different, unique ways. So I'll kind of walk you through some things that we did within PNC to help build this out. So if you go to just what we'll be covering here, I'll give you a quick overview on PNC, talk about how we built a business case, how we developed areas of focus, we defined and then refined the strategy, and then we'll hand it over to Steve, and he'll talk about how we use PNC uses Glassdoor, a little bit more about that, and then we'll take questions at the end. So developing an effective sourcing strategy. This is we can be very innovative with this, but ultimately every organization has to determine, is this necessary, right? There has to be an area of need or focus. And so that's something that we had to take a look at uniquely in 2008 when PNC was going through the National City acquisition and determining different lines of businesses and where we were best in class. And we saw an opportunity at that point to really define how we were attracting talent at that time. And so we'll walk you through a little bit more about PNC here on the next slide. So for those of you that aren't familiar with us, we have about 55,000, a little more than 55,000 employees today, about 6.6 million retail customers. As you can see in the orange area, that's really our retail footprint. So you see the brick and mortar branches primarily sit in those regions. And then we have other service offerings, mortgage, commercial corporate banking, asset management that spreads to other parts of the country. So right now, how we're defined as a centralized resource center. We like acronyms, so we call ourselves a CRC at PNC, right? And what we do is we have kind of a 3-pillar approach within the CRC that includes sourcing, which is going to be the focus of topic of conversation today. We have recruitment marketing, and we have IPR. IPR is our internal placement recruiters. It allows for us to develop partnerships with our internal employees that for whatever changes and dynamics we have, we can look to retain them within the organization. Recruitment marketing is a partnership that we have with any outreach and posting strategy, brand marketing, things like that. And then obviously our sourcing area, which is our in-house agency. Think of it very similar to a third-party executive search firm, but yet we're PNC employees. Our only client is PNC. We're paid by PNC. We bleed, blue and orange, right? So this is the CRC. So going back to, we'll call it 2008, 2009, when we were first looking to build the sourcing strategy, we had to build obviously a business case, right? So when we looked at that centralized strategy, we wanted to identify what were the challenges, what were the goals that we wanted to achieve, how did that impact the business, and how are we going to ultimately align that, right? So the first thing we wanted to look at is that the need had to be there. So in 2008, and I won't share the specific numbers with you, but the number was mind-boggling. In 2008, we really weren't hiring. We were going through a major merger. We weren't really looking to add a lot of talent at that time, but we still spent quite a bit in third-party agency spend. So we knew there had to be a better approach, and we thought, gosh, why don't we look at those people that are currently placing people externally with us and bring those people in-house and create an in-house environment where they had access to internal communications, build stronger partnerships and alignments, and leverage just the internal knowledge we had, but yet bring them in from the outside so that they can bring their outside perspective, new innovative ideas to help propel PNC. We had to look at the passive versus active approach. Up to that point, the majority of our recruitment activity was very reactive. We were looking for active candidates in the marketplace, which, as we know, is a very good source of talent. Most of our hires continue to come through that method, whether it be internal talent that's looking at career opportunities within, or external just through the PNC branding strategy to be attracted to PNC. But we wanted to capture that other area and those hard-to-fill positions, the challenging roles, where people aren't looking for jobs necessarily, and how are we going to outreach to those individuals and introduce them to opportunities within PNC. We wanted to look at, there was challenges within our recruiting as we continue to grow and expand. We wanted to do that both through acquisition and through organically. And the recruiters were stressed. They were very busy. Their rec load was very high, and they didn't have the time to go out on their own and source external passive talent. They were so busy handling the needs and people coming in. And then we looked at alignments. We had to identify areas of job families that had a similar focus on the certain geographies. So we looked at, how do we support from a regional perspective? How do we support from a line of business perspective? And ultimately, how is that going to impact the business? Once we built the business case, then we had to get buy-in, right? As any of you know that have built any type of new strategy, it has to be supported. And so that was a huge factor for us, as we had to work with both our recruiting partners, who are our clients, as well as the business, to let them know that, hey, there is a need here. We have a solution to solve that. And so we wanted to make sure that was communicated. So we wanted to make sure that, one thing is that it was centralized, meaning that our recruiters will always be the support group for the business. They will be the point of contact for all things talent acquisition, right? But we wanted to have, behind the scenes, we wanted to have sourcers who are networking, they're building a passive talent pipeline, and getting those people introduced into the recruiter, into the business. We needed to earn trust and add value. Obviously, the goal is to fill positions, right? We wanted to reduce our dependency on our agency spend. Just within the first year of our existence within the sourcing function, we actually cut agency usage in half, and we've continued to reduce that dependency. Now I want to be careful to state this, that it's not that we're not using agencies. We do believe there's a strong partnership there. We just wanted to make sure we were using it in the right instances and appropriately, and so we've set guidelines to make that appropriate. So now that we've got the business case, we've got the buy-in. The bank's pretty stoked at this point, right? They're pretty excited about what we're building, what we can create. The model that was that was communicated through the rest of the group was pretty exciting. So now we had like 3 people, right? Probably not going to support a 55,000 employee organization with 3 sourcers. So we had to build a team. So we started by identifying the talent profile. And apparently I fit into that ideal talent profile because this is about the time that I came into PNC. So we looked at a lot of different factors, right? We wanted to see, we certainly wanted to look at talent that came from the agency, executive search. They're used to cold calling. They're used to being able to research and identify talent, go out and find them, and very comfortable on the phone and overcoming objections and making those opportunities. Next thing we do is go find those people, right? So we identified them. Now we know what type of profile we're looking for. We had to go and kind of find out, okay, where do these people sit? What types of organizations are they in? And we had to be creative with it. And what I mean by creative is we didn't necessarily just want to go out and say we're only hiring from third-party executive search firms. We want to have a diversified skill set. We want to bring in new innovative ideas into PNC, different perspectives, and learn from those and continue to create that innovation from people that are doing this type of role in other areas. So it was everything from corporate recruiters to third-party headhunters or agencies. It was also people from the business, right? If we have, if we need somebody to source branch managers within our retail space, who better to know that function than somebody that's done that job? So we looked at those opportunities to say, hey, if we can find people with high integrity, strong work ethic, that want to succeed, that believe in PNC as an organization, what our philosophy is, the rest of this business is pretty easy, right? Get on the phone, have a conversation with people, get to know them, get inside their head and their heart, and that's what's going to drive that success down the road. So we really wanted to be creative with the types of people we brought in. We hired branch managers to source branch managers, for example. And then we wanted to build a foundation. So, starting the function, we had a small percentage of internal talent, but really had to build a lot of that. 80% of the new hires that came in were bringing in new and fresh strategies. Then we had to look at alignment. So now we're building this team. Now we wanted to look at, how do they align? Do we align them to region? Do we align them to line of business? We had to look at all those factors. At the time, our focus was we supported by a line of business. We wanted individuals to know and understand the specific skill sets needed and required. We wanted them to know, hiring managers. We wanted to know, build partnerships with the recruiters. That was critical to our success. Those relationship management partnerships that we were establishing trust with our recruiting partners, so that they said, hey, I need help on this, and I trust you to go out and do this. So we really performed as an in-house agency. We developed one type of process for every search of a project that was engaged with. So, and we'll get to that in a little bit later. We wanted to also identify, in addition to the reactive needs, right, that would have typically gone to an agency, but also get ahead of things and identify what's coming down the road that we can start building a pipeline for. Let's not necessarily wait until the position's open and we can post it and see what kind of candidates are there. Let's go find out what the market bears today and be a little bit more proactive and get ahead of that business. One of the big challenges we came, faced with early on is that the requests that were coming in were primarily with aging recs. So a lot of these positions they're open for a long time. They had been, recruited on, sourced on for sometimes several months before it comes to us. So it was up to us to kind of get creative with being able to identify new paths, new trajectories, to be able to get in front of some of the passive talent to introduce to those positions. All right, so now we've got our team established. We've got them aligned. We wanted to make sure that they were that they were given every resource, every training, and the ability to be successful. So we offered a lot of different avenues. We wanted to make sure that they were comfortable cold calling. They knew how to overcome objections. They knew how to get referrals on calls through conversations. Not referrals of people that are looking for a new opportunity, but referrals of people that they respect in this industry. We need to get them very comfortable with using our ATS, making sure that we're working closely with the recruiting partners on how this is documented, how candidates are being pushed through, and make sure that we're compliant. We took special time to make sure that they were trained on how to source within the diversity space. Make sure they know how to mine job boards, leverage some of the other tools. Boolean search strings, was getting very popular at that time. So we wanted to arm them with all of this different training. We did get, most of our folks, I think all of them at the time, were certified diversity recruiters. They were certified social sourcing recruiters, and we wanted to make sure that they had those skills and tools to be successful. Then we had to track, right? We had to see, is this working? So we had to identify what are some goals. And, ours was an interesting approach in that we certainly had some ideas, right? We knew, a lot of us coming from the executive search business, we knew how many phone calls we had to make to get a certain amount of, submittals to the hiring manager to get a certain number of hires. We knew the metrics behind it, but we didn't necessarily know within the PNC structure and taking into account touch-based calls, company meetings, research time. And so we wanted to leverage, what our team could really function at and what was an appropriate level and would that garner the results that we need. So we set up, certain benchmarks or goals for the sourcing team to achieve, and then we would track those. We had a very sophisticated tracking system early on. If you guys are familiar with tick marks on a sheet of paper, that's how we started tracking. And eventually we were able to get into a CRM and leverage that. That is a much more effective tool to track metrics. Again, when we started this method, it was more about the activity. What's the front end mode, right? So year one, it was about how many people can we find that aren't in our system today and get those people introduced into the system so we can find them at a later point, okay? Year two, it was more about, all right, we need to convert these people to an interview, right? We need to not only have the conversation, but identify, are they qualified, for positions that we're looking for within PNC, and then get them introduced into the organization. And then by year three, we were looking at, really the real quality of those, which was, are these people getting in front of the business, and ultimately are they getting hired, okay? And we've now taken it a step further with our establishment now to be able to say, okay, we're able to get, find people, right? We're able to get them in front of the recruiter. They're talking to the business. They're getting hired. Are they staying with us, right? And we kind of look at that as a fit for the organization. So all those areas are tracked. They're talked about on a monthly basis within our leadership team, and always ensuring that it's aligned to the goals and objectives of the business. So intake sessions, everyone's very familiar with these. This is a critical area for us, especially early on, but it continues to be. Majority of the time, intake sessions do take place with the recruiter, the sourcer, and the hiring manager. It's not always the case. It at least has to be with the recruiter and the sourcer. But one of the huge things early on was to make sure that when the sourcer's on these intake calls, is to make sure that we're, number one, communicating that their point of contact is the recruiter. Okay, when we hang up the phone, we'll probably never have a conversation with that manager again. But the fact is that they need one point of contact, and that is the recruiter. But we also wanted to let them know what's happening behind the scenes. When we hang up the phone, what's happening on your behalf to go out and attract talent. They should at this point be aware that there's a posting strategy, there's branding, and a lot of the people that they're going to be talking to and interviewing come from that pool of candidates. But also that we're going to be looking at some passive candidates, and we'd be articulating, when those people came through, and make sure that they were comfortable with some of the hot buttons that would need to drive that strategy forward. So that was critical to our success, to make sure that they knew there was an added feature, It was no added cost to them as a hiring manager to be able to do this, but they still had the luxury of having their one point of contact and their relationship with the recruiter. So now we go out in the field, right? We've had the intake session now. We've taken on a new project, and then how do we continue to build this? And this is involved in both, when we have a rec focus search, when we have pipeline building, but we always need to be, if we look at the top of that chart, research individuals. So we had to research the market and find out who exists that can do this job that we're looking to fill, right? We have to go out and build the relationships and obviously call candidates. We want to talk to them. We want to get them on the phone. We want to engage them in some dialogue, and we want to kind of maintain that. So we call it a drip campaign sometimes, or just continue to follow up on a pipeline. We want to identify key motivators. In other words, what's important to them. Okay, we already know that anytime somebody's looking for a job, there's going to be three factors that come into play: opportunity, location, and compensation. It was really up to us to identify which was most important to them, and would an opportunity within PNC potentially put them in a better position, personally or professionally or financially. And then we want to move towards an interview. So once we find that we've got an appropriate individual that's motivated by an opportunity with PNC, we want to make sure that they're introduced into our recruiting process, always keeping the best interest in mind of both the candidate and PNC throughout the process. That's a continual cycle. We do that with each individual that we speak with, each market, each project. Sometimes this cycle is 10 minutes long. Sometimes it's 2 years long, right? It just depends on which part we're at. So as we started going through this, what we learned very quickly is that our clients, our recruiting partners, had very similar needs that were repeated over and over again. And so we wanted to create a very clear option or service menu options for them to be able to identify. Because as we know, each project, each need, each open position is different. It's unique in terms of how we go to market, how we attract individuals, how we sell the opportunity. And so we wanted to provide them very specific. So we came up with these 5 service offerings. We put service level guidelines to each one of those in terms of who's accountable for which step of the process to make sure that this is a success. And we put process flows. Here's what you can expect. So every time they came in to put in a request within our team, they knew what was going to happen. They knew what the end result would be. They knew what was going to happen along the way, and they knew how long it would take. So as we look through these, and these were really critical to us really setting a strong foundation within the PNC sourcing function. So pipeline building, as most people are familiar with the term pipeline, this is really us going into a market, taking on a project where it's a future need. We want to get ahead of the curve on being able to identify prospective candidates on positions that we have down the road. We don't necessarily have an open requisition today, but we know that we may have one or several, and we want to get ahead of the curve and build that pipeline and obviously manage those throughout the tenure of the project. Prospect sourcing is by far the most popular request. This is, very similar to, if you or your firm go to a third-party agency and you look for, I have an open requisition. It's hard to fill. We've had it posted for 60, 90 days. We've had umpteen candidates come through, but we're not finding the talent right now. We need a very proactive approach to the passive community, and that's what we do. So we had a process built out to support those. We had consultation and development. So this was really a training opportunity. It was an opportunity for us to leverage the skills that we knew or were learning and share those with the rest of talent acquisition. So this ranges, anything from cold calling techniques to job board mining to any different type of training opportunity. Sometimes these were a one-off. Hey, I hired a new recruiter. They're not real clear on how to mine candidates within our ATS. We would have a one-on-one training session. We've had up to 100 recruiters on a 2 90-minute call sessions based on web skills training and kind of the intangible, the cold calling side of it. We also owned agency engagement. One of the critical things within this process is that, when we attacked a search, especially from a proactive sourcing perspective, we wanted to make sure we knew who was working on this, right? Who are the candidates that are being contacted? We wanted to ensure that there was a good candidate experience throughout, that the market didn't get oversaturated, that we had a very targeted approach as opposed to a blind shotgun approach. So we wanted to own that agency engagement, understand that who's going to be engaged on this, who's working on it, and make sure that they knew what activity had been done there. We wanted to give a lot of transparency in terms of those partnerships. And then the last one we created was a name generation. So there are times when the recruiter wants to be that first voice over the phone. They want to be the ones reaching out and contacting to the market, but they either don't have time or the skills to go out and create that activity. And so sourcing would come in and develop, hey, based on what you're looking for, here's all the people and their contact information on how to connect with those. So those were our service options. We make it very clear that although we have these identified, there's a process and procedure to each one of them, that ultimately if there's a challenge, if there's a need within your talent acquisition organization, your recruiting issues, to come with us, talk through it. We understand that 5, options are not going to solve all issues. So, we invite them to call us and talk through the strategy and how we're going to solve that. Oftentimes it does fit into one of these buckets, but sometimes it doesn't. We need to get creative and make sure the right resources are aligned. So I talked a lot about this, passive versus active piece of this. One of the critical areas, and this starts from, the intake call through the process, but ultimately as we were building this, we want to make sure that, our own house was on the same page, right? That HR, talent acquisition, all could clearly define in the same message the difference between a passive and an active candidate and what that meant in terms of the hiring process. So we wanted to make sure that, a hiring manager knew and that the recruiters had the ability to consult with the hiring managers on what this means and how that might be different throughout the process. That was critical, and with 8,000 managers within PNC, it, as you can imagine, can get very tricky to make sure that message is consistent throughout. So that was the main focus, is make sure that, within sourcing and recruiters, that we had the same message defined, right? And, when we carried that through an intake call or we carried that through to a hiring manager, that they were clear on those expectations as well. This created a lot of benefits for the business. It shortened the time to fill, created a better fit based on, numbers that we've been able to show for retention. It certainly reduced our dependency on outside agencies. It was really more cost effective overall, and it saved time and money and improved quality throughout the process. So now we've established all this, right? A lot of work, a lot of building, a lot of communication, very exciting. And as everyone knows, as you start to execute on these, you have to refine it. You have to remain innovative. New products, new solutions are continuously coming in, and we wanted to make sure that we were constantly leveraging the best options, the best tools, the best talent out there to continue to perform at a high level. So we're always looking. To this day, we continue to refine, how we're defined. How do we go to market? How do we support our business? How do we support the recruiters? What do those partnerships look like? So one of the things is combining forces. As you saw in the one of the first slides, within that CRC kind of 3-pillar community there, we've introduced the recruitment marketing team within the CRC. We have IPR, our internal placement recruiters, as part of the CRC, along with sourcing. And really where we want to be is a centralized support function to our recruiting function, so that they have an outlet to go. But we have to make sure that all of these parts that are supporting the betterment of the business are working together, that communication is happening, and that kind of the 1 + 1 = more than 2 scenario. And we strive every day to make sure we achieve that, and most of it is through communication and transparency. Intelligence. We all talk about it. This is a huge undertaking that we look at every day, and we really encourage this. We have tools set up within the organization to identify intelligence. We feel this really builds a stronger relationship with the line of business. It builds trust, right? It builds credibility. It takes us from being a customer of theirs to a true added partner, value-added partner. It improves knowledge of our competitor landscape. It allows PNC to improve the candidate and employee experience. It helps us identify areas of concern within the organization. If we see something that maybe we're doing, or reputationally things that we're hearing in the market about us, we have an opportunity an obligation to improve those areas. So this is something that we rely on our sourcers, because they're in front of the market and talking to our competitors more than anyone else in the organization. It's critical that they help drive that information back to the business. So in conclusion, in summary, so it says here a 3-year process to build a successful sourcing function. It's really it's been about 5 years now. Certainly the first 3 were huge building blocks in terms of how we really leverage the needs of where PNC was at. Started seeing results very early on in the process. We've continued to expand, our value year by year as we look at the numbers and the value that we're providing back to the business. So it continues to be an ongoing, but really those first 2 or 3 years were critical in building the foundation of how we operate today, and then we continue to refine and grow moving forward. The interesting thing that we've seen, and we really didn't know going into this, but we've had very minimal turnover within our department, which is great, right? I mean, people tend to like working in these roles. We've gotten creative with a unique culture. We have a virtual workforce. Basically, every sourcer works virtual. They work from their home. Some will go into an office on occasion when we feel like we have real jobs. We like to put on a suit and go into the office. But for the most part, this is a virtual environment. So it goes back to when we look at talent we bring in, there has to be a high integrity trust factor that these are individuals that are self-motivated and are going to get up each day with a drive and a passion to represent PNC in the best fashion possible. Going back to some of the turnover, as we look at some of the numbers, most of the turnover we've had have been internal turnover. They've gone into other positions within PNC, either into leadership capacities or have gone to become a corporate recruiter or have gone into recruiting operations center. A lot of different factors where they've been able to use their skill sets and their knowledge and be able to still transcend that throughout the rest of the organization. So right now, the future goal of our team, as we sit today and we always look at, how can we continue to improve? We really want to sustain the impact that we're having to the business, right? Which is providing top quality talent, right, at a cheaper rate, and to do it quicker, okay? Like everyone else is trying to do. So we continue to look at ways to sustain that impact and remain innovative. We have a constantly changing environment with the technology and tools and talent that surround us is constantly changing, and it's really up to us as we continue to grow this to remain innovative, to remain partnered with the best and the brightest out there. So thank you very much. That concludes my presentation today. Thank you. I think I want to introduce Steve from Glassdoor.
Hi. So I'd like to kind of spend a few minutes talking about what we see at Glassdoor in terms of what candidates are doing today, their behavior, how they're being influenced. We have a lot of analytics, a lot of data we get at Glassdoor, and there's some interesting trends. Can you give me okay. And one of the key things we do quite often is obviously survey recruiters, survey employers. And one thing that sticks out is over half of people who accept a position at a company within the first 6 months have some type of remorse about the company and the opportunity. And that's largely down to the expectations that person had going into the company. So the picture that was painted are the expectations that everything's rosy and everything's perfect. Like everyone builds the job up and sells people hard on the job. And yet we see a huge statistic here, 51%. This was from a survey of over 2,000 recruiters in North America. And of that 50%, almost 3/4 of them wanted to leave the company within 6 months. And really, what this tells us is that people in the past, and certainly I can remember when I was getting jobs and talking to recruiters and companies, the whole process or my whole knowledge of where I got information about the company was either from the employer themselves or from a recruiter. There was no real information out there other than a corporate website that could tell me information about the company, the culture, what it's like to work there, salary information, kind of what the process was, whether employees were happy. And what we've kind of seen today is when we surveyed pretty much all of our user base of 22 million people. Next slide. We got an overwhelming 95% of our users told us they were influenced by reviews. And really, this is no different to me going out at a restaurant every week and trying to figure out with my wife where we should go to eat. The first thing we do is we go onto Yelp or Zagat. We look at restaurants in our area, and we base all our decisions based on reviews of people who've eaten there, and whether the food was good, whether it was bad. Same thing for holidays, hotels, or even buying a car. So we all kind of see the glossy adverts on TV where the employers are telling us how great the latest and greatest cars are. And again, first place I'll go is online forums and see what the real deal is with the cars, where I can get the best deal. So a lot of our day-to-day activity revolves around reviews and accessing content that's published every day by people like me and you. And what we've kind of noticed is almost half of job seekers today will use Glassdoor at some point of the process in applying for a new role. It could be applying for jobs, it could be searching, it could be researching companies. And that type of interaction we see is huge every day. We have people tweeting that they're researching companies on their cell phone while they're actually during the interview process. So in between interviews, they're actually validating like what the interview questions are, what's people's feedback on the company, and whether the people are engaging with are painting a similar picture of what it's like to work at the company. And information is really kind of at anyone's fingertips now in seconds. Kind of statistics this year prove that most people surf on the internet on their cell phones, on mobile devices, than they do on their laptops, because we're constantly on the move. Whether in a restaurant, whether we're in a bar or getting coffee, everyone's got access to the cell phone. If someone sends an email or information, you can look at that in seconds. So it's almost like real-time visibility for job candidates and how they understand the companies they potentially want to work for. An employee brand has such a big influence on influencing the candidate's decisions. Next slide. So two things that Glassdoor does is kind of, it might sound obvious, is job advertisement. So all of the jobs that companies and employees have, we obviously advertise them on Glassdoor. What makes it unique though is in the context of those job advertisements, we also expose the employer's brand or the employee's story or the employer's kind of unique message about why they're different relative to the competition. So if I'm looking at a job and I'm interested and I can see a rating there of the employer, what I'm going to do at the same time is I'm going to check out whether that employer is actually worth working for, whether it's a good match for me, whether the culture is what I want it to be like, whether employees are happy. And literally in a single click, I can get an unbelievable amount of information that tells me whether I want to work for that employer or whether this company is a good fit. If it isn't, I'll go look in and I'll continue other jobs that might interest me. And really, it's almost a selective process where people are influenced based on what they like to see in a company. And employer branding for me is kind of, in the past, it's been heavily underrated as influencing candidates. And that's because not a lot of companies tell a great story on their career pages or in general about why they're unique. Sometimes you get a kind of corporate boilerplate on like how they're conquering the world and how everything's great. For me, I'm interested in what's unique about the company. What makes them stand out to their competition? Is it a fun place to work? Are people engaged? Is people's careers growing? Everything about that company, like, I'm interested in. It's not just about the job description and the responsibilities or the title. Am I actually going to enjoy working at that company? And I think branding is a huge impact. If you don't have a brand, or your competitor has a better brand than you or a better story to tell, chances are candidates are going to go and work at that competitor because they see something more compelling. They see something that is unique and different to you. So all the way through this kind of process of influencing candidates, the results that employers and people who advertise jobs with Glassdoor see is they see a kind of an enormous jump in applicant quality. It's almost self-selection in that applicants, they'll only apply if they actually want to work at that company because they've already done their research, they've already done their due diligence, and they've made it a conscious decision whether is that a company I want to work for. And I can look back 10 years when I came out of university, and the first place I'd hit is job boards, and I just put in the title that I wanted, which was Java developer at the time, and I'd probably just randomly apply at the top 5 because if it was in the right area and the right location, that's what I wanted to do. I would have no information, no context about those companies that were advertising. And really that's, I think, with job boards and a lot of other channels, you get a lot of applicant quantity, so you're never short of people applying. But the people you want applying are the people who really want to work at the company, who've seen your story, who understand how you're different and what your kind of mission and values stand for and what you're trying to achieve. Those are the people who are really going to kind of make an extra effort in an interview process because they really want to work at your company. Versus the people who've just randomly selected, hey, apply because that's the job title I'm interested in. What that means is kind of less resumes to process and kind of faster time and less cost associated with the whole process. And again, the influence, you see there, 3x influence. What that means is Glassdoor generates around 3 times as much traffic to career pages as any other recruiting channel. Even LinkedIn, our career pages, because of the SEO on Glassdoor, when people type an employer's name and reviews or working at Microsoft, for example, 9 times out of 10, that candidate will end up on Glassdoor and they'll be influenced by the employer's brand, the reviews and the feedback they see online. And really this influence is very key. If you want to tell a great story, you've obviously got your career page that you've built, you've got your corporate website, but Glassdoor is really independent. It's a place where job candidates, employees can share their experiences just like Yelp or TripAdvisor. And again, employees can engage with candidates online as well. So if you see reviews, the employees can respond to comments, they can thank people for feedback, they can join the conversation. So if I get more specific and we look at the type of results, so PNC, for example, profile page on Glassdoor, can you move it? In just a single year, the traffic doubled, more than doubled on Glassdoor.com. And here you can see the PNC profile page. You can see everything about the company. You've got photos, you've got the social media integration for Twitter, for Facebook. You've got salary information, reviews, the interview process, and what jobs are available within the company. And also a lot of multimedia content as well. So videos and stories about why the employer is unique. And really, like 200,000 visits, we've seen in some cases that more employers get more traffic on Glassdoor.com than they do on their careers page, because this is obviously one of the first places candidates are going to go to research the company. And this is pretty consistent with what we see with a lot of employers who engage with Glassdoor and project their employee brand online. Great stories to tell. And as a result, you can get hires. I think VMware in the first 90 days managed 10 hires just advertising on Glassdoor. So that's obviously a great result. So with that, I'll turn it over to any questions.
Great. Well, thank you to both Chad and Steve for giving us just a very in-depth look at a couple of concepts that are going to be helping to drive engagement and talent acquisition in the coming days. We have had a number of questions come in through our question and answer interface, and we will get to as many as we can in the time that we have remaining. So HCI members, if you have yet to submit your question, I would encourage you to do so now. But let's move on to our first question. This is coming in from Barbara, and Barbara asks, how is PNC using social media or job search sites to find appropriate candidates?
Great question. So social media, and I can't get into too much detail on that, but because we are a pretty heavily regulated organization, our social media is pretty limited. We obviously have the corporate sponsored page, which will sometimes highlight positions there, but we really rely on just the branding, right? We want to be able to, put forth a good image, and that's how we care for folks throughout their process, so they have a good reputation and look for us. But in terms of the some of the social media strategies, we're pretty limited compared to some of the other companies.
Thank you. Another question here from Harsha. She asks, what is the size of your team and the level of executive sponsorship you receive? Maybe you can talk for a minute about that.
Sure. So the size of the team, right now within sourcing, we have about 24 sourcers. And then we have a handful of people that support our IPR, and then another handful of people that support our recruitment marketing area. So that comprises the CRC. But right now we're at about 24 sourcers that support the 55,000 plus employees. In terms of it was an executive support. Is that what you're saying? If that's the purpose of the question.
That's
so the
correct.
Executive support. Okay, so it's across the board. So we support virtually every line of business today, and so the fact that we still remain 5 years later, I think, shows that we do have that support from the executive level.
I have another question here from Patrick, and he asks, can you talk about some of the metrics you use to measure the success of your sourcers?
Sure. So, and that, as I mentioned before, it's changed a little bit over time. Just as we looked at when we started, it was really more about that front end activity. So it was, how many times can you pick up the phone and make a phone call, right? How many people can we add into the ATS? And that's really evolved into, today the focus is really on the results side. So we look at, a number of hires. We look at the number of interviews that we're able to submit and get scheduled with the line of business, that we're able to get scheduled and submit to the recruiter. We also look at the ratio of recruiting interview to line of business interview. And those are the main points. But we really prioritize it to say right now, ultimately our job is to help get the hires and drive the results for the business.
Thank you. I have another question here from Ali. And Ali, if I misquote your question, please feel free to just chime in and add a little bit more on there. But the question is, are sourcing team members PNC employees, and you're referring to them as third-party sourcers?
So, yes, they're all employees of PNC. A good portion of them have come from third-party agencies. So they historically came from an executive search firm. We recruited them, and they're now PNC employees.
Great. Another question here from Jennifer, and Jennifer asks, how many open recs do you have at any given time? Also, how much time is spent sourcing for passive candidates versus reviewing the active candidates who have applied through your ATS?
Sure. So we don't touch the requisitions. The corporate recruiters own that phase of it. So any active candidates that are coming in directly into the recs is managed by the recruiters. So we're solely responsible for the passive candidates strategy. So that differs, right, depending on line of business. Some of our businesses are very rec focused, meaning there may be a series of open requisitions, anywhere from 5 to 15 typically, that we're working on at any given time. Some of our businesses are more pipeline, so we look at it more of we're looking for a specific skill set in a certain geography. Retail has a big focus in this area where we know we have multiple needs in an area, so we're not so focused on, we want to, fill this rec number, right? It's more about we want to identify the best and brightest talent in that market and get them introduced to the business.
Thank you. Another question, kind of a clarification on Barbara's question earlier regarding social media. Are there specific sites like LinkedIn that you use to search for candidates? And what sites do you guys use to post your positions externally?
Sure. So I can't get into the specific sites that we use, but we do have a posting strategy that has a broad outreach scope of getting in front of multiple areas, both that have a local and national presence. From a posting strategy. It's a very efficient and effective way, meaning very little work coming from the recruiters to do that. We do leverage, LinkedIn as an option within our firm as well as others.
Thank you. Another question here coming in from Twitter, and maybe I can get both of you guys to weigh in on this, but I have one of our followers asking, what would you say is the biggest benefit of Glassdoor for recruiters and sourcers? Maybe, Chad, we can start with you, the biggest benefit you've seen from your relationship with Glassdoor, and then maybe, Steve, you can weigh in after that.
Yeah, I think certainly visibility, credibility. It's definitely a value-added partnership, that we have. I think it almost like the name says, right? It creates, transparency from somebody that isn't familiar with our organization to take a look in and, hey, don't take my word for it because I'm going to have a biased opinion, right? Take other people's word for it. It's that objective opinion that can be leveraged that I think offers so much value to us, and we're proud of it. The results, as Steve had mentioned in the report, I think speak for themselves.
Yeah, I think majority of customers just they get visibility into what employees are thinking, and just it's a good platform for employee engagement as well. Not just projecting your brand, but no company's perfect, and if people are aware of things they need to fix or responding to feedback or putting things right, there isn't a better place to do it than in front of your job candidates who are considering applying at that company. I guess the customers who don't respond to comments and perhaps kind of turn a blind eye, people speak outside of the internet and online. They've got friends, they've got colleagues, and making the adjustments and tweaks internally and responding to comments means you care about employees and you care about what they've got to say. You appreciate their opinion. One customer's using it for real-time employee engagement. So whenever a review hits the site, they get an alert immediately and they respond to every single review on the site just to make it part of their process. So that if any candidates do see bad reviews or they see constructive feedback, they can see the employer cares and that they're actioning it.
Great. Another question here. What is the role of sourcing in influencing your employer brand strategy?
The role of sourcing and influencing our brand and strategy.
Brand strategy, the employer brand strategy.
Brand strategy. Sure. Well, I think as with anything, we look at it as almost similar to a customer or a prospective customer. So a lot of our conversations in terms of our outreach is, representing ourselves and the organization in the best possible light possible, and that's doing the right thing, even when no one's looking. It's making sure that we have accurate information that we're sharing about either the role or position that we're recruiting for, or what we stand for. So the volume of our activity is primarily over the phone. So it's a lot about the conversation, how that interaction goes. PNC.
Another question here from a member, Jennifer. On average, how many applications do you receive each year?
How many applications? How many applicants do we receive? Oh gosh, I don't even know that number. What is it? I don't know that. I don't know that offhand. That'd be a good question for our head of recruitment.
We'll see if we can get that for you, member. If
Sure.
we get
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
we'll push it back out. Have had a couple of questions come in from members, just questions around the ATS and the CRM you're using to kind of track both candidates and the relationships through your sourcing and recruitment process. Maybe if you could talk for just a quick minute about that.
Sure. So the ATS, applicant tracking system, is what it is, right? It tracks applicants. Okay. CRM is to track prospective applicants. So the sourcing function primarily uses the CRM. That's where we, can identify prospective candidates, their information, their notes, make sure we're scheduling, our drip campaigns, and make sure we're following up on continuing to build those relationships of people that we add into that system. Once there is established interest and they go in and apply, those people are then copied into the ATS, and really that's primarily managed within the recruitment function. Did that answer the question?
I think it's good. Remember, if you would like a little bit more clarification, please feel free to kind of chime in there again. But actually, I'm afraid, remember, if you chime your question in, we'll try to track down an answer for you, but I'm afraid that we have run out of time for today's webcast. But please, again, do feel free to head over to our social media channels like our LinkedIn group page or on Twitter via the hashtag HCI Webcast if you would like to continue the discussion there off the webcast, but virtually and online. I would like to say one more thank you to our guests, Chad and Steve, and to Glassdoor for making this webcast possible. And, of course, the biggest thank you of all goes out to all of our HCI members. We appreciate you taking time out of your afternoon to spend with us, and we look forward to seeing you on another webcast again soon. Again, thanks, everybody, for coming out today, and have a great afternoon.